Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard.
Welcome to Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on this podcast. His name is Ted Brown, and he represents one of the great alternative parties we have, and he's running for office. And friends, I know you're in suspense, so he's going to tell us all about what party he represents and what office he's running for momentarily. So welcome to the podcast, Ted.
Oh, Andrew, thanks for having me on. And as you asked, I'm Ted Brown, and I'm the Libertarian Party candidate for U.S. Senator from Texas in the 2024 election, and I'm running against Republican incumbent Ted Cruz and the likely Democrat Congressman Colin Allred.
Oh, my. That's quite the race.
It is. It should be the second biggest race in the country that'll have a Libertarian candidate on the ballot in November after president.
Awesome. That's what we want to see. So, Ted, in addition to what you just mentioned, kindly give us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Oh, well, I'm 63 years old. I've been a Libertarian Party member for my whole adult life. I joined when I was an 18-year-old college freshman, and I've been a Libertarian Party activist my whole adult life. I'm one of the lifers there. And my goal is to support liberty however I can, and I've done that so many times running for office over the years because that's the best way to get out the libertarian message. In fact, my activism in the party has also included over the years recruiting other libertarian candidates because basically the general public, and understandably, I mean, politics is not always that interesting to most people. They don't pay attention to politics until the election year, and usually not even until like the fall of the election year. And if we're not there with candidates, they're not going to know that we exist, that our alternative viewpoint exists, or anything. So that's why we need libertarians running for office, and that's why I do this to promote the libertarian cause. And certainly it'd be great to be elected. We have elected people here and there, but people really need to know there's an alternative. That's why I'm running.
Sure. So of all the races you have to run for, you chose the U.S. Senate. So kindly tell our audience why you strategically chose this particular race.
Well, like I mentioned, it's a very important race. And the presidential race obviously is the biggie. Everybody concentrates on that. But the U.S. Senate's very important. That's a strategic part of the U.S. Congress. And senators, since there are only 100 of them, have a lot of influence.
Yeah.
And no one else is stepping forward to do this, so I'm always willing to step forward and help the party however I can. And again, since I am an experienced candidate, I think I will be able to represent our views quite well and get out there and let the people know that they don't have to vote for Democrats and Republicans, the parties that have ruined the country, and that there is an alternative.
Sure. So because as senator, you'll be representing the whole state of Texas.
Yes.
So when I interview representatives, I ask them about the demographics of the area. So that is very broad when it comes to Texas. So for those in our audience who are not in Texas, how would you describe this? A lot of people would stereotype Texas as being a red state. Do you see that as accurate, or how do you see things?
Well, it is a red state. I mean, it's one of the most Republican states. For example, no Democrat has won statewide office since the 90s. I mean, they've really got a monopoly on things. But Ted Cruz almost met his match like 6 years ago when Beto O'Rourke held him down to like a 2 or 3% victory margin because Cruz is just not very personally popular. He's kind of like, I don't know. Nobody really likes the guy, but they're putting up with him because he pushes all the right buttons in the Republican Party. He's a culture warrior, and he just wants to tweak Democrats and liberals without doing anything to promote liberty, really. And this guy started out very strong in 2012 when he was elected the first time as a Tea Party candidate. He was shutting down the federal government. He was accurately calling Mitch McConnell a liar for lying to Cruz about bringing up amendments. Cruz was the runner-up to Trump in the Republican presidential sweepstakes in 2016, and Cruz accurately described how much of a liar, narcissist, and evil character Trump was. But then he just gave in. He just totally said, I don't care that Trump insults my wife, accuses my dad of being one of the Kennedy assassins, or whatever. I'll just go along with this guy because that's what the Republicans in Texas want. That's not leadership. That's just being a lapdog, really.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. So for this race, what issues are you bringing up in particular? Do you think are the most pressing issues to discuss?
Well, I'm always concerned. I mean, obviously it's overly broad to say the size of government, but it really is the truth because there seems to be no motivation in Washington to tone it down. They just keep increasing the size of the federal government every year, and that includes a very large budget deficit each year that adds to the national debt. Now, when I ran for Congress 4 years ago, I was looking at I was updating my website, and I was complaining 4 years ago about, or maybe even 3 years ago when I did that, the $23 trillion national debt, and now it's $33 trillion. These guys just can't stop spending more money that they don't have, and it's really hurting us. That's why we have inflation. That's why there's going to be some kind of a bust. This is just not sustainable in the long run. And so I do want to bring up how fiscal responsibility is very important. No one seems to care, but they should be caring about that because that's very important to the future. So because that's the economic side of things. I also believe in personal freedom. I totally disagree with the red state culture wars and wars on people who are different and banning books. It's like the recent meme that said Texas, where you can live the Handmaid's Tale but not be allowed to read it. And that's how things are. And then the third prong is foreign policy, where only libertarians believe in a non-interventionist foreign policy, and it seems like there's intervention on steroids going on now under the Biden administration with no indication it would be all that much different under the Republicans. So that's why we need to be out there saying that, no, you don't have to put up with what these other parties are doing. There is an alternative. Vote for a third party. Vote for an alternative, and that'll really send a message that people want to change in the way things are done. If you just keep voting for Dems and reps, you're going to keep getting what you always got.
Exactly. So to clarify your position, as a Libertarian Party candidate, you don't believe we should be giving any country foreign aid, right?
Correct, yes. Now, of course, the worst thing is the absolute worst would be to send U.S. troops to other countries to fight other people's battles. That would be the worst part. There's like a gradient of like how bad things are.
Sure.
So the worst is sending U.S. troops, while the least is sending humanitarian aid. But in reality, all of it is unconstitutional. There's no cause for any U.S. tax dollars to be spent in that fashion outside, just to be given to other governments. But I'd be much more worried, like I was totally against the U.S. interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, because certainly those involved U.S. troops, and I was glad when they got out of there. So we thought they got out of there, and now U.S. troops are being attacked in Iraq, and I'm thinking, well, why the heck do we still have troops in Iraq? I thought they were taken out of there years ago. So we've got to get our troops out of Iraq, out of Syria, where they're being attacked by Iranians. They shouldn't be there to be attacked. They shouldn't be attacked by Iranians, but they shouldn't be there to be attacked by Iranians. There's both aspects of that. So we're kind of like setting it up to get attacked if we have military bases real close to these nasty countries. And there's no reason for that. So yes, I'm opposed to foreign aid. I'm particularly disturbed with what's happening over in Israel and Gaza right now, because the U.S. has been a major supporter of Israel, and I'm a Jewish American. I'm sympathetic to Israel. I want to support Israel, but I sure don't like what they're doing over there. They have a right to defend themselves. Every nation has a right to defend themselves. But that doesn't include disproportionate or indiscriminate self-defense. You can't just to go after a bad guy. You can't kill everybody in your path. You have to consider that there are innocent civilians and that they have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, just like Americans do. And they have no right to just be bombing everybody's homes, making people homeless, killing thousands of innocent people. I just cannot go for that, and I would never support U.S. Tax dollars going to that particular activity. There has to be a way of tracking down the Hamas criminals without killing everybody in sight and destroying that whole country.
Yes. And that's just like the Afghanistan war, where a lot of people criticized it. They didn't pinpoint the aggression that we initiated, because obviously after 9/11, there were bad actors that needed to be punished. Yet it was very indiscriminate. A lot of people viewed it as and it wasn't focused. So you see the same thing that's happening in Israel today, right?
Oh, even worse perhaps, because it wasn't really the U.S. goal to like blow up everything in sight over in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was to the U.S. wanted shock and awe over there, but they aren't concentrated. Those are big countries. So it's not like they were in this little tiny area the size of like New York City or something, destroying all the homes, everybody's homes. That was not what we did over in those countries. So there was a lot of room, and people were living out in the country, and things like that. It's a lot different than what's going on in this very concentrated area in Gaza. But you're right, though. The U.S. in the past has used very disproportionate activities to defend ourselves, which were totally unjustified. Like in World War II, for example, how we were the good guys, but we seemed like the bad guys when we firebombed Dresden, Germany, which had no military significance and killed thousands of civilians for no reason. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombs, again, those cities had no military significance, just killing civilians willy-nilly. So we had no right to do that and to act that way in defending ourselves. Libertarians, unlike most people, actually care about individual rights, like the hopes, wants, dreams, needs of every individual person, and not grouped as an amorphous mass of people who belong to some ethnic group or citizenship of some nation. I care
Sure.
about individuals, and that's and obviously what we're seeing in the Middle East is the Israelis don't care about individual Palestinians, and the Palestinians don't care about individual Israelis. They just think of them as the other, the other to be wiped out. That's just a terrible attitude to have.
So if we don't believe in foreign aid, how about alliances and allies? How would that work under a libertarian framework?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly not an isolationist. I believe in it's non-interventionist is the key on that. I believe in free commerce, free trade with all nations, good relations, talking to all nations, trading with them, cultural exchanges, etc. And the problem is when the military gets involved and military goals get involved, everything gets messed up there. No, I would not have any military alliances. But I would have plenty of trade and goodwill between nations, because as the old saying goes, if goods don't cross borders, troops will. And if countries are trading with each other and are in good terms in that regard, it's way less likely they're going to be fighting each other.
Sure. So you would get rid of sanctions against Cuba and Iran and Syria and things like that, right?
Right. I don't believe in sanctions at all. Well, they're okay against like individual creeps that are running those countries, but not the countries, because really that just hurts the people in that country.
Yes.
It doesn't really hurt the leaders. Like, for example, we've had sanctions against Venezuela for years, trying to put it to Maduro, the dictator down there, and all he does is benefit from it, and his people are driven into grinding poverty and are trying to come here because of that. It's not like they're the ones that were hurt. I mean, if there were no sanctions against Venezuela, they'd still be in bad shape down there, but maybe not quite in bad a shape. And I know there's a sympathy to sanction Russia and to sanction Iran and sanction all these countries, but the leaders just do not suffer from that.
So it's a futile thing to do, and it only hurts people who don't need to be hurt.
Pretty much, right. Like Putin personally should be sanctioned, but not Russia, for example. But it's a big difference. If you're talking about the personal accounts of all the the Russian generals and the Russian government officials and all that, versus just the country itself not being able to trade and get necessary goods and this sort of thing. There's a big difference right there.
Sure. In addition to promoting alternative parties on this podcast, we also love to promote election reforms. Yeah. So when you become senator, so which election reforms are you going to want to implement?
Well, if you're talking about, obviously there's some reforms that are needed in the Senate. That's a little bit different. But for electoral reforms in general, first of all, it needs to be a lot easier for any party to get on the ballot. People shouldn't be limited to Democrats or Republicans, and there are so many states where it's almost impossible for alternative parties to get on the ballot. Now, in Texas, we have ballot status. The Libertarian Party and the Green Party both have ballot status.
Good.
But the legislature has made it very difficult to run candidates because they keep imposing these high filing fees on candidates, and they keep making it harder and harder to avoid them. So, for example, it was a $5,000 filing fee to run for U.S. Senate, but now for the Democrats and Republicans, say when Ted Cruz pays his $5,000, he pays it to the Republican Party, and it helps pay for their primary election. Same with Colin Allred paying $5,000 to the Democratic Party. So that helps pay for their election. Libertarians don't have a primary. We nominate by convention, same with the Greens. And so any filing fees that we pay go into the general fund just to pay for the Texas government. It's totally ridiculous. So, we've sued on that issue, saying, wait a minute, this is like not equal protection of the laws. Our money is not going to finance our party's candidates. It's going to just in the general fund, unlike the Democrats and Republicans. So that's something that has to be changed there. And then there's the first outside the first to the top voting systems, where it's like individual districts make it very difficult for libertarians and other alternative parties to get representation in government. I believe in proportional representation, where if you get 5% of the vote, you get 5% of the seats. And that's like the way they in a lot of European countries, parliaments. And in fact, like New Zealand has that. And a libertarian-ish kind of party actually is now part of the coalition government in the new government there, because they were able to get seats in parliament because of their percentage of the vote.
Good for them.
But it would have been more difficult to win individual districts. So that's the kind of reform we need. That wouldn't work for U.S. Senate, obviously, because that's like a statewide election. But it would work for like state legislatures. It would work at the U.S. House. And once Libertarians and Greens and anyone else starts actually being able to serve in office, the public will see that we're able to deliver and actually vote more likely to vote for us. But now it's just like a complete guess. Well, these guys have never been elected to that office, so how can we trust them to be in that office? Well, give us a chance, and we'll prove ourselves.
Sure. So you're talking about the Senate in particular. You said there's some ways you want to change that. How specifically would you like to change the way the Senate works?
Well, the problem is, and the leaders control everything. Like, they control the entire agenda, and they often just don't let senators propose amendments to bills. They create these ridiculous omnibus bills that include everything but the kitchen sink and are 3,000 pages long, and nobody reads them. The as a senator, I would expect I'm not going to vote for anything that I haven't read. And of course, after I read it, I'm sure not going to vote for it, probably, given the kind of bills they present. But most of these senators just listen to what their leadership say. Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer just says, "Hey, this is a good bill," and they go, "Oh, sure, no need to read it. We'll just do what the leaders say." And that's not what the people in any of the states expect. They expect their senator to be someone who knows what's going on, to read the bills, and to vote for what's best for their state and for the American people. As it is, these kind of bills are just good for special interests. They can just sneak their special provisions in there, and nothing ever changes. So I favor like a one subject at a time rule, that every bill is like on one subject, and that there's like complete open debate and open amendment by senators, and because every senator should be equal. They're all elected by their state. It's not like Mitch McConnell and his constituents in Kentucky are any better than a senator from Texas and their constituents. Everybody should have a chance to influence legislation and present alternatives to be debated and voted upon. And sure, it might take a long time, but a representative government is like a separation of powers. That's a clunky, clunky way of doing things and a time-consuming way, but that's what protects people's rights. That's what the founding fathers wanted. They didn't want people to be able to ramrod through legislation. They wanted it to have to go through the House and the Senate and be approved by the president and maybe even reviewed by the courts. I mean, it's just not like the parliamentary system where they just force things to write it, force it through, and that's it. You know, we have balance of powers, checks and balances, and I'm very in favor of that.
Okay. So I saw on social media, in our political social media sites, they were talking about how this current Congress session has passed less laws than Congresses in the past. And
thank goodness.
So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. So from a libertarian perspective, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or does it depend?
Well, in theory, it's a good thing, but it depends on what the 23 laws are. Like I was mentioning about those omnibus bills, if most of them are like that, and they're like what should have been like 200 bills, if you would have split out all the different provisions in all those bills, then perhaps they violated people's rights just as much as if they would have passed 200 bills or 2,000 bills, depending on what the text of those particular items are. So, but as someone said years ago, no man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. So, you know, the more Congress meets, the more bills they pass, the more in danger we are, both economically and, civil liberties-wise.
Sure. So in general, the more laws are passing, the worse it is for us.
Absolutely. We need. One of my goals is to repeal laws. We don't need new laws. We need to repeal existing laws, lots and lots and lots of them.
Okay. That would be great. There's a lot of laws we could get off the books that would benefit our society.
For sure. In fact, so many laws are not. I mean, we know what should be against the law. I mean, murder, rape, robbery, fraud, attempts of each of those. That's what should be illegal. I mean, you could put like all the laws that people really need to follow and that they agree upon in like a little 10-page pamphlet and mail it out to everybody. But instead, we have like thousands and thousands of pages of all these laws that created by government. Some of them are just like, paperwork and administrative violations and many laws that most people do not think should be the law. And if we repealed 90% of all laws on the books, we'd be perfectly safe. And then I want to review all the rest of them to see if they're being implemented badly, and they probably are. So there's just so much that needs to be done there. There's too many laws. People say there ought to be a law about everything, and that's whenever they say that, that means they believe that their idea of what ought to be a law is backed up with a gun. Government will put you in a cage and maybe kill you if you disagree. So, no, there ought not to be a law, is my view. I would be very difficult to get me to pass a new law, that's for sure.
Sure. So, how about the particular issue of police reform? What do you think is the solution to that?
Oh, major reform is needed. But part of that comes from how many laws the police have to enforce. So part of it is the legislator's fault, and part of it is the police department's methods of doing so. So if they had fewer laws to enforce, they wouldn't be able to shake people down as much as they do now, because I fully approve of the police going after murderers and rapists, but they seem to prefer going after other people instead. Like, for example, here in Austin, there's been a scandal for years about rape kits never being tested. That's like some big deal. That should be one of the first things they do instead of going after drug dealers or something.
Yeah.
But the police seem to like to go after victimless criminals, and then they like to shake down minorities. I mean, it seems like one of the big things for police departments all over the country is to stop people for silly traffic violations, and then try to find other evidence of other crimes. And if it's a minority person, like someone who's black or Hispanic, they get into some kind of a tussle there, and somebody can get injured or killed. So there should be way fewer interactions between the police and the public. I mean, there should be very few traffic stops unless someone is, zigzagging in and out of traffic at 95 miles an hour, and really causing a danger. Most of these stops are for revenue purposes, not for safety purposes.
Oh, wow.
And really, most of the public, for example, like in New York City, when the cops stopped doing traffic enforcement because they were having some kind of labor dispute or something, there was no increase in accidents or anything like that, and people were quite happy about not being stopped by the police for silly, expensive traffic violations. So I think most people can drive around without worry, without getting stopped or arrested, and still the public is still going to be safe most of the time. Not all the time, of course, but most of the time.
Sure. Sounds sensible.
Yeah, and then the police are trained like their training is like making them into warriors. Like everybody is like an enemy that has to be fought like an army or something when they come across people. But really, the police should be there to serve the public and to make controversy less, like de-escalate situations. And whenever police departments do that, I think Salt Lake City did that. They had a large decline in police-involved shootings and assaults on citizens, and they de-escalate situations. Don't just keep escalating, and forcing people to comply, when that person, is not used to dealing with the police, doesn't understand what's going on, and is going to get be treated like some sort of like a prisoner of war or something. There's no excuse for that. The police, if there's no real crime being committed, if no one's lives are in danger, the police should just say, "Have a nice day, sir," and leave. They shouldn't just keep escalating situations. And that's why the training has to really be changed for the police.
Sure, that sounds good. So, Ted, how can our audience support you in your campaign?
Well, they can go to my website, which is tedbrown.org,
okay.
and they can certainly see my positions there and my bio and all that, and some of my favorite quotes from history and all that. And there's a donate section, and I certainly welcome donations because the more that comes in, the more I'll be able to advertise during the election year. It's tough being a third-party candidate. I'm not offering any. I don't have any special interest behind me because I have nothing to offer them. I'm going to take away all their special privileges if I get elected. So they sure don't want me. They want the guys who are the major party candidates who pretty much should be wearing NASCAR-style jackets, using their corporate sponsors and everything. So I welcome individual contributions. I've gotten quite a few so far to help me with the filing fee, which I mentioned is $5,000. And so obviously more is needed to run the campaign. Follow me on Twitter at Ted Brown Liberty, and there's also my Facebook, which is Ted Brown for Libertarian for U.S. Senator from Texas. So follow me on Facebook, Twitter. There'll be more and more posts as time goes on, as the campaign gets into more overdrive. And feel free to on the contact me by message or by message to either of those, to Facebook or Twitter, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that the listeners have.
Perfect. Ted, thank you for coming on the podcast and talking about your campaign and the solutions you have to make this nation better yet.
Oh, well, Andrew, thanks for having me.
We wish you all the best in your campaign and all your other personal and professional endeavors.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care and all the best.
Okay.